Hey there, it's Kat and this is Brews and Reviews. In today's video, I want to give you guys a wrap up and talk to you guys about all of the books that I read in May. I read 13 books, 8 of which were audiobooks and 5 of which were ebooks. I had 3 3-stars, 7 4-stars and 3 5-stars. So overall, pretty good reading month, although my reading has definitely taken a downturn during May. I read the minimum number of books that I have sort of said that I want to read in a month, and I really had to push myself to read some of them because I spent all of May being very ill. Like, I had 2 separate illnesses and then I got COVID. So the worst thing about having COVID for me was that I had this really bad headache and I literally couldn't read. So I had no way to physically read for the entirety of the time that I had COVID, and let me tell you, it's still bothering me now. So a lot of my reading for May and a lot of my reading potentially for June is going to be audiobook based, just because I am trying to not hurt myself. I just had a phone call, so I might have just gotten completely distracted with what I was saying. So audiobooks, thank goodness, can come to my rescue. But anyway, we're talking about May right now, and I'm going to talk about the 13 books that I read throughout this month. So the first book that I read was Destiny Found by Leah Steele, and this is the 3rd book in this trilogy, and it's a shifter reverse harem romance thing, and it finally came to a conclusion. And I've got to say, I actually enjoyed this conclusion. It was a good conclusion to this story, and there were far fewer, if any, annoying flashbacks. Like, I think part of the problem I had with the second book is there was so many flashbacks, and they were slow. And they really took me out of what was happening in, like, the main present day plot. I also think this one had a nice mix of, like, the spicy smut sort of side of it and the actual story. I mean, the end was very quick. It's not the best story I've ever read, but it was fine. I do have to say, though, that this is, like, 1 woman, 5 guys, and it just sounds so exhausting. Like, the way that this woman was living her life, it's just exhausting. How do you sleep? How do you get anything done apart from, like, the sexy times? I don't know, because she was having a lot of sex. And I just feel like maybe you need to give yourself a rest. Are you not tired? Anyway, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. But wow, that woman has stamina. I'm going to talk about the next 2 books together because they are part of the same series. So the first one that I read was A Court of Winds and Ruin by Sarah J Maas, and the second one that I read was A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J Maas. So this is sort of the conclusion of the A Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy, and A Court of Frost and Starlight is kind of like a honeymoon book. The way that I have it placed in my mind is like a Christmas special fanfiction sort of episode of the The Court of Thorns and Roses series. I don't know. It's got the same characters in it, but it's just sort of focused on everybody. It's not really a super necessary book, but it was fun enough. I do feel like Rhysand was wasted in this book, but that just is what it is. So Aqua is a reread for me, and I loved it. It is such a ride, and I still felt all of the emotions, even knowing what was going to happen, and all of the sadnesses that do happen. I really enjoyed it. 5 out of 5 stars. Who surprised no one. A Court of Frost and Starlight was a new read for me. I had never read this one before, and I just thought it was cute, Christmassy. It's not Christmas, but it is like the equivalent of Christmas in this world. Fan family, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It probably doesn't deserve 4 out of 5 stars, but I enjoyed it. 4 out of 5 stars worth of rating. I had fun with it. I needed some nice, happy, fluffy things. I just wish that Rhys had been not so wasted. I don't know, he was kind of like a nothing character in this book, and it kind of annoyed me because I enjoyed him so much in the original trilogy, so. Next up we have Dreams of Gods and Monsters by Laini Taylor. This is the 3rd book in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. It's the final book. I actually finished this trilogy. Not only did I continue with it, I finished it. So I am super happy with myself because that is a goal I had for like the last 2 years, and I just keep failing at it, and now I've finally done it and I feel really happy with myself. I don't want to say anything about the plot because it will really spoil things. It goes on such a tangent from the first book, and I really liked where it went. It's kind of like a bittersweet ending for me. I liked where it went and I think it was really interesting, but I am just kind of sad about the end. I don't know, there's this thing about Laini Taylor's endings where they're like kinda happy but kinda sad, and I don't know how to feel about it. It's left me with so many emotions. So that's kind of a good thing though. I don't know, there's something about Laini Taylor's writing which it turns out that I just really enjoy, and I'm kind of sad but also happy. Though I do have to give you guys a nice little anecdote about my reading experience with this book. So while I have this physical book, I also listened to this book. This was earlier on in the month, so I still had the capacity to use my eyes to read. So I was listening and reading along at the same time. And it's a really good job that I had the audiobook, because this copy of this book finishes on page 600, and there are actually 613 pages in this book. My copy just doesn't end. It finishes mid-sentence. It literally ends on a comma. I would never have known what happened at the end of this book without actually having had the audiobook as well. I was so confused because like I was getting to the end and I was like, oh, there's still like pages left, and I thought maybe there's like a clip of Strange the Dreamer or something. No, the book just continued, and the book had ended in my physical copy, and I just had to pause it and be like, wait, what? And I was kind of sad about it because I feel like it took away a little bit from the feelings that I was having towards like this final chapter of the book, which were, you know, a lot of feelings, because I was so outraged about the fact that my book was missing so many pages, and I was like, wait, what? This is so confusing. And yeah, so I have like this weird defective copy of Dreams of Gods and Monsters, so that's interesting. Anyway, I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, and I did really enjoy it. While we were talking about the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, there is a sort of spin-off novella to that, which I also read during May, and that is Night of Cake and Puppet, and it is a very short novella about Susanna and Mick. Ooh! I got distracted by a knock at the door, but I'm back. So, Night of Cake and Puppets is about Mick and Susanna, who are sort of like the comic relief side characters. I mean, they're much more than that, but they do bring much needed levity to this trilogy as a whole. So this is like how they went on their first date. It's just very cute, and I liked it. It's a nice fun contrast to everything that's happening and much darker things that are happening in like the second and third book. So it's a nice little pick-me-up after some of the worst things that happen. The next book that I read was Date Me, Bryson, Keller by Kevin Van Wy. This is a contemporary romance book where a guy called Bryson Keller, who doesn't really date, he's quite popular, gets dared to date people, and he has to date someone every week, and then he'll break up with them at the end of the week, and he has to be like the best boyfriend. So there's not like anything really romantic, but he does like the dating thing. And it becomes this big school-wide thing, so whoever asks him out first on a Monday morning dates him until, you know, Friday evening at the end of the school week, and then they break up and he dates someone else the next week. The main character is gay and he is not out, but he just on a whim asks Bryson Keller out, and he's the first person to. So they sort of end up dating, but it's also kind of a secret because the main character doesn't want to be outed. There is a slightly traumatic forced outing situation, so if that's going to be triggering in any way, just be aware that that does happen in this book. The romance is cute though. I like the characters that are in the book, and for the most part it is cute, aside from, you know, the slightly traumatic side of it. But yeah. So I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was We Three Heroes by Lynette Noni. This is a companion set of short stories about the sort of side characters in the Medoran Chronicles. So the main characters' 3 best friends have 3 separate stories, one of which is somehow so heartbreaking because of something that happened in the end of the last book. So in the scheme of the series, this is like 4.5, and but the last thing that you meant to read before you read the final book in the series, which I must say I am too nervous to pick up. I keep wanting to pick it up, and I'm like, oh, but how is it going to end? I'm very invested. I give this 4 out of 5 stars, which is quite good really for short stories, because I don't always gel with collections of short stories. I think it very much depends on the strength of them as a whole and how much I enjoyed all of them. So yeah, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was The Gay Teen's Guide to Defeating a Siren by Cody Wagner. I don't really know if this is classed as middle grade or YA. I think I would put it more at middle grade because it's very young teenagery. So the premise of this book is that the main character is gay and comes from a very conservative family who then find out that he is gay and send him to a conversion camp type thing. But the conversion camp isn't really a conversion camp. It's a secret camp for gay kids where, you know, they can learn to love themselves and stuff, but they will pretend that it's a conversion camp so that they can, you know, not traumatize and hurt people the way that conversion camps do. So it does have a premise that is not great, and there's a lot of non-acceptance of gayness in here. It's not particularly pleasant to read about for quite a chunk of the book. But there is this whole thing also with sirens and potentially people being brainwashed in some capacity. It's not like a super main focus of the book. It kind of comes into it a little bit. I feel like the sequel would have a lot more about that. I'm not sure if I'll read the sequel though, because I don't know if I was invested enough. I don't know sort of how I ended up feeling about it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was The Return of the King. So this is part 1, part 2, The Return of the King, and I loved it. Who's surprised I gave it 5 out of 5 stars? Nobody is surprised at all. A Return of the King is my favourite part of the story. I don't know why, it just is. Also, I forgot quite how much happened at the Shire at the end. Like, I knew that something happened, but I thought it was like 1 chapter, and then when I was reading it, I was like, wow, there's quite a lot of things that happen in the Shire. Like, a lot. And that was good to reread and sort of see what happened there. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely glad that I reread these, and I just had a nice time. It was very comforting and sort of nostalgic for me, and I loved it. The next book that I read was Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. This is the second book in the Lunar Chronicles, and I read this with Abby from Abby Lee See the Book Lover. It has been so long since I read this book. I think it was one of the first books that I read whilst having a booktube channel. I'm not even sure if I read it just before then. I didn't love it the first time that I read this book. I, for some reason, really didn't like it. I was like, oh, install, and for some reason I really just didn't like Scarlet and Wolf. I think I figured out why I didn't like it the first time that I read this book, and I don't think it was justified. I loved it when I read it this time. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I could definitely see a lot more promise in it, and I could see past all of the things that obviously got me the first time. Potentially mild spoilers, but I feel like you could probably see it coming if you read this book, and most of BookTube probably has read this book, but mild spoilers until I put my hand down, okay? So, the betrayal and the fact that, like, Wolf betrays Scarlet really got to me the first time I read this, and I was like, I fucking hate this, and like, I wouldn't forgive someone who betrayed me, because, spoiler, I would not forgive someone, because I'm an unforgiving Scorpio, and if you are dead to me, you are dead to me. So anyway, I mean, I know what happens later on in the book, so I was willing to forgive, to get past where I'm at. I felt different about it this time, so yeah. Anyway, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Enjoyed it a lot. Very glad to have reread it. The next book that I read was The Alibi Girl by C.J. Skews. I read this as a buddy read with Mel from a book fiend named Mel, and I don't think I enjoyed it. No, I didn't enjoy it. So this is really weird for me because I really enjoyed the Sweet Pea trilogy. Like, all 3 of the books in that series were great. I really enjoyed them. This one, no. The whole first half of this book was really odd to me, and I wasn't really sure what was happening. And the way that the main character acts is very childlike, and I don't know. I find it very hard to get behind characters that lie all of the time and like lie to themselves, and they just lie. And that is the main thing that the main character does. She goes around and tells people different lies, and she's a very unreliable narrator, which is interesting to an extent, but I found it very hard to get attached to the main character because I was like, well, I don't know you. There is no essence of you as a person because you're just making up identities. The second half of the book was better because there were answers and there was a different perspective character. I preferred that. The end, not so much. It didn't do it for me. It just felt too neat if it happened at all, because again, unreliable narrators are unreliable, and I feel a little bit confused, and I just felt a little bit let down because of how much I enjoyed Sweet Pea and that trilogy. This just wasn't for me. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because it was alright, but I don't think I'd recommend it. The next book I read was There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. I feel like this was all the rage on BookTube at one point in time, and I didn't read it then, and truth be told, I only picked it up this time because 1, it was on sale, and 2, it was the buzzword readathon to read directions, and I was like, inside, that counts as a direction. So that's kind of why I picked this book up. I was like, I haven't read anything for the buzzword for this month, so I'm just gonna read this. So I did. And to be honest, it wasn't the best book I've ever read, but I feel like with being so ill, and you know when you want to just like watch trash, like watch like teen slasher horror, like I tend to do that when I'm just feeling like, oh. And that gave me the same vibes. When I was reading this book, I was like, it's kind of just what I need, because it's like nothing, it doesn't really impact me in any way. It's like a little bit silly at times, a little bit predictable at other times. I liked it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I don't think it deserves 4 out of 5 stars. It's probably a solid 3-star read. But for the time when I was reading it and how I was particularly feeling at that point in time, it did its job. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars because, you know, I just needed some trash. I needed some easy high schoolers getting picked off one by one by a killer. That's what I needed. And the last book that I read in May was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And I've been putting this book off for so long because I was intimidated by it. So many people love this book, or they really don't like this book, and I was like, which camp am I going to be in? I hope it's the camp that loves it, but also, I don't know, the way that people talked about the writing kind of made it seem like it was going to be a little bit more literary than I wanted it to be. I don't usually gel well with that kind of book, but it wasn't. It wasn't at all. I ended up loving this book. I did give it 5 out of 5 stars, so that's where we're at with this. I think this was such a bittersweet book, but it really, like, got to me, and I really felt invested in all of the character stories and how it just wasn't a great situation for anyone. I really liked how it unfolded. I really liked all of the characters. I really like Luke because I am a giant trash bag. We do need to remind everyone that I always have a thing for the characters that are like morally great / evil, which I would say that Luke is not a good character. He is not a nice character. He is an asshole, but still my favourite character of the book because I am trash. But I don't know, I feel like the whole book was kind of beautiful, and I don't know, it's not like me to sort of read books that have prose that I would describe as beautiful. I'm definitely more of like a story like, this was awesome, oh my god, yeah. But there's something about the way that it was sort of woven that I would describe it as beautiful. 5 out of 5 stars. I am very glad that I read this book. I mean, not only because it was on the 30 books to read before the 30 list, which as the year is moving, 30 is coming out real soon, so I have to get a move on with those. I'm really glad I read it. It just gave me a lot of feelings, and I wasn't expecting to be quite so impacted as I was. But maybe again, that is partly because I'm ill and I'm just rambling now, so I'm gonna stop talking. I really enjoyed that book though. Anyway, those are the books that I read in May. Fewer books than I have been reading in previous months, but also I've been sick, so I think that I still did a great job. If you like this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!